Hey, it's Drybear. We've got another endgame discussion to have when it pertains to Path of Exile 2, and this time we're going to talk about the defensive options available: armor, evasion, energy shield, and then consequently the other aspects to it like life and such on. Now again, just like we did with the last Magic Find video, which is more of an endgame discussion anyways, we're going to try and include as many different kinds of people in this conversation as possible, because there is a lot of very in-depth discussion happening right now with ARPG veterans, specifically ones that come from the prequel Path of Exile 1, talking about the availability of different defenses and how they function through the game overall. But of course, please add your perspective on this down below in the comments and how you feel about the endgame survivability and the availability of different defensive options in Path of Exile 2 as it stands right now, because I'm sure that GGG is looking at all the feedback and wondering what their next steps are going to be. So as it stands right now, you have several different options for focusing on different defenses. The two defensive for physical are going to be armor and evasion, and what's great about evasion is evasion applies to projectiles and various other attacks as well, which is really awesome. Evasion is just a chance to avoid an incoming attack, and armor is a way for you to reduce physical damage taken from hits, and the other option of course is for you to be able to do energy shield. So you actually have like energy shield bonuses that allow you to create a secondary resource, which is down here next to your life bar. You can have a certain amount of energy shield on top of your life that gets taken out first as another defensive option. And so there's big discussions right now on what to do and what's best to use, and it's pretty well proven that as of right now, when you're doing extreme late game pinnacle boss encounters or like tier 10 through 15 plus on the map system, energy shield is just winning out, to the point where, you know, the classes that have energy shield or use energy shield are just surviving better. And today I'd like to talk about why that might be, and also what they can do to improve upon it and what the things look like overall. Now let's first say that this kind of disparity only really exists at hyper endgame. If you're asking me, and I've been asked many times over the last couple of weeks, I'm playing this build, I am playing this class, should I go evasion, should I go armor, should I go energy shield, should I do a mixture of them, and which one is going to be the best? And honestly, after looking at all of the stats and functionality for these across the game, I can tell you that basically up until maybe a tier 4 or tier 5 map, they're all relatively equivalent. You don't really have to worry about, am I going to be able to get to end game and start end game with an evasion build or an armor build or a life build, or if I do energy shield, what's it going to cost? What's it going to take? That sort of thing. It works fine for the majority of the game, and they're all pretty close together in their efficacy. However, their problem and disparity starts growing once you push past around tier 5 maps and beyond, because the availability of percent scaling on each of the resources is not equivalent, and also the option for being able to survive individual hits that are incredibly large is not equivalent, and that's kind of the crux of the problem right now. So as a quick comparison, I went through the entire skill tree looking at the available nodes that you have for increasing a percentage scaler on the different defensive stats, and you can see that listed here. And so there obviously is a bit of an inequality on the availability of stats for these, and also how many skill points it requires. Now this list, I just counted only the flat percentage increases, meaning it doesn't have a condition attached to it. There are times where if you have taken a hit recently, you can increase one of these, or if you have taken a specific damage type recently, you can increase one of these, or if you've done certain event, you can increase one of these. But the big discussion right now is around being able to survive large 1 or 2 shot mechanics using these. And you can see that overall there is, of the flat percentage, like just a percent scaler on your evasion, there is 949% available in the skill tree, and there are 66 nodes that provide this. So 66 skill points, assuming you could make it to those areas in the skill tree, would provide 949% total of evasion. For armor, it's 877% armor over 62 skill points. For energy shield, it's 972% over 61 skill points. So, and this is mostly because there are some 40% energy shield, 60% energy shield, 40% energy shield. There's just a lot of like very, nutrient rich, like dense nodes that give you a lot for a single skill point. So it is the highest percent total across the whole skill tree and costs the least amount of skill points to get for that scaler there. And you'll notice that there are a couple nodes that give you a flat maximum on like life, like 20 maximum life, but there are very few nodes that have a percent increase on life. That one is very much a controlled substance for GGG as far as being able to scale your life up. And because of this, along with several uniques in the end game, you can very rarely see people with full builds in like high-end mapping, aiming at like between 3,000 and 5,000 life on average, but it's quite common for people to get to like 9,000, 10,000 plus energy shield, which is like over double the effective health value of that, because there's just so much other ways to scale energy shield. And also there are ways to convert life into energy shield, which you can do so as long as the energy shield is up, you can convert it quite easily. So it just means that the builds that rely primarily on life and evasion or life and armor have much harder time scaling the maximum life value, whereas the builds that rely on energy shield and not life can not only get more energy shield, but they can also convert the life they're not using into even more energy shield, either through nodes, but also through the uniques that are available in endgame. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the uniques in the game that can have major impacts on this. There are some that greatly benefit armor. There are some that greatly benefit all defensive options. There are some that greatly benefit evasion and even with energy shield, but there are some really cheap options like Ghost Writhe, which will allow you to convert maximum life into energy shield, which again, with an energy shield, you don't have to worry about life as long as you can maintain your energy shield properly. And there's also rumors of this one specifically, like conversions like this of life into energy shield being applied before deductions, which means that you can run things like, CI, Chaos Inoculation, which allows you to set your life to 1 for a benefit, but then you can convert the life to energy shield before you lose that maximum life. There's a couple other options in here that do that, and there's some general balance questions that I think that GGG needs to solve going forward, just total on the amount of things that are available. So the first challenge just comes with availability and the ease of access. So right now it's just much easier to get a energy shield build working for hyper late game, like T10, T9 plus through to the uber bosses than it is to make sure that a life build works. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't work for most encounters. However, the next topic that's worth talking about, aside from just the availability of the stats and the ease of scaling them, is just how the stats themselves function. See, when we talk about armor in most games, there is a very simple solution that gets applied, and that is it is just a global damage reduction, either on all damage or on physical damage only. And typically to control this from, getting out of control, like in an RPG game, you wouldn't want armor to stack to 100% damage reduction, because then eventually you just make like a armadillo tank and you would never take any damage and it would be too strong, right? So generally the solution for these kinds of things is just to put in diminishing returns, or to use a dice roll mechanic like games like D&D use, so that it's like an over-under kind of thing, or difficulty of hitting a target, which kind of falls into the category of evasion. But if you do a diminishing return, then that means that, there's a theoretical maximum. You could say that as armor damage reduction or damage reduction from armor reaches like 60% damage reduction, every point of armor becomes less and less valuable until eventually you hit the theoretical max of 60% damage reduction. However, that is not how armor works in Path of Exile 2. Path of Exile 2 has a different approach to this, and you could make a debate on whether the armor approach is correct or not. However, the way armor works in Path of Exile 2 is that it adjusts to the amount of damage you're taking. It does display as damage reduction in game on your character sheet, but it doesn't actually function as a pure damage reduction functionality. Like, it's not actually that kind of mechanic. The way it works is it will scale up or down the amount of damage that you take based on the size of the hit, which thematically makes a lot of sense, right? If I'm wearing full plate armor and you throw a stick at me, I'm probably not going to feel it. But if I'm wearing plate armor and you drop a mountain on my head, it's not going to matter what armor I have on. I'm going to be crushed under tow, just because the amount of weight that's being pushed down on me is irrelevant in that case, right? I'm just going to get crushed to a pulp no matter what. So I think thematically it makes a lot of sense. But the way it works is if you have a small or medium-sized hit, it will take a lot of that hit away, which means you're brushing off attacks because you have armor. However, when you get to a very large hit, like a massive uber pinnacle boss hit or a super stacked high affix rare in a late game map, hit, it will start being less and less effective, which means that, again, when you get to hyper late game and you're fully stacked for armor, you can still get 1 or 2 shot, because if the hit is so big, it's negating a lot of the effect of armor. And that's where I think a lot of people take issue with this kind of concept, is that if you're running full energy shield, you can have a lot more effective health. And it also means that you don't have to worry about being killed by the single hit, because you have more effective health to eat the total damage that you take. But also, if you're running armor with life, your total life effective health is lower, and your armor gets worse and worse as the single hit gets bigger and bigger, which means if you're running life and armor, you're more likely to get 1 shot. And if you're running energy shield with other reductions, you're less likely to get 1 shot. And that's kind of where Path of Exile 2 is right now in its endgame. It's all about whether or not you survive the big oh no that's coming your way. And Evasion is kind of in the same way as well, though Evasion is a little bit easier to stack and also can reach much higher. You can get to the point where you can completely avoid a lot of hits using the Evasion, but it does still run to a similar problem with Evasion being the base of life. So if you do a life Evasion build, it can definitely suffer similarly to the life armor build, but in a lot of cases you will also see people run energy shield evasions. The evasion is there just in case you run out of energy shield and you take a hit on your normal life value. The evasion is there to help you by avoiding the hit or projectile that's coming in. Now, the equalizer that comes in with this is going to be the shield mechanic, blocking, and having active block as an option as well. And if you have a very high stun threshold with a good shield and you're well timed with your active blocks, in this game, if you haven't played a character that uses a shield, you have the option to have a passive block, which they just recently buffed to trigger from all 360 directions. If you have a shield equipped, you have a chance to block and reduce the value of the hits coming in separate from armor from all directions. But you can also raise your shield with an ability, the active block, which is a directional mechanic that allows you to use your stun threshold as you would in a Souls-like game to completely absorb attacks that are coming your way. It works on magic, it works on projectiles, it works on physical damage, all of that. And so that's kind of the saving grace for armor life builds, is that if you're using a shield and blocking and you're good at active blocking, you can actually survive. And I think that's kind of where you need to be moving towards if in the current state of the game, until we get an update from GGG on this. If you're trying to play super late game armor life build, you probably are going to get pushed more towards using dodge rolls properly, like actually getting good at your dodge rolls, and using active blocks to mitigate large hits that are coming your way. But the challenge with this is that it doesn't really work for builds that really don't want to use shields, right? If you're trying to use a two-handed build in some way and you don't have a shield in your offhand, or you're using a two-handed build in both weapon sets and you can't equip a shield, that doesn't solve the core problem of armor being a bit inferior to the other options in the game. So that's where we're at right now. And I think there's also, a lot of questions around things like CI, Chaos Inoculation. So Chaos damage is a big chunk of some of the scary enemies in the game, and also poison falls under chaos damage as well. So being able to sacrifice your life in order to gain complete immunity to poison and all forms of chaos damage is a huge boon that a lot of builds are running. Like many builds are running CI, Chaos Inoculation, to fit, but there's no equivalent to this, right? There's no keystone node that says your energy shield becomes 0, but you become immune to elemental damage, right? There's no other version of this that would be on the other side of the tree, like near Templar Druid, Warrior Marauder, or like Mercenary / Duelist. There just isn't a fair comparison of that. You have ways to convert mana cost, you have ways to do like energy shield. You can even do things like being able to convert your life recharges instead of energy shield, so it flips the functionality of life and energy shield, and then when you use a flask, it heals your energy shield instead, so it flips that functionality. But I think there just needs to be a little bit more care taken in the representation on the other side of the tree, and possibly even just more ways, if you're stuck on this side of the tree, more ways to raise your overall health that would be equivalent to how much you can raise your energy shield for effective health value, comparatively based on the classes you're going for, knowing that it's very unlikely that a warrior is going to go all the way over to this side of the tree to get energy shield functionality. It's also very unlikely that you would get a monk or a sorceress that would come down to this side to get something on the flip side for life and or for armor. So that's kind of just where we're at with this issue, but let me know what you think about it down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.